My dear brothers and sisters in the risen Lord, Honorary Season, Week 34, Day Thursday. How would you be if God, who is the top of judgment, should but judge you as you are? Said by Shakespeare. The account of the siege and destruction of Jerusalem is left to us by Josephus, an historian of singular brilliance and undoubted veracity. He was a Jewish priest. While fighting against the Romans, he fell into the hands of Romans and remained with them during the siege and destruction of the city of Jerusalem. In his books, The Wars of the Jews, he gives the account of the siege and destruction of the city. In one part of the account about the destruction of the city, he describes the massacre thus: "And now rushing into the city, the Romans slew whomsoever they found, without distinction, and burned the houses and all the people who had fled into them. And when they entered for the sake of plunder, they found whole families of dead persons and houses full of carcasses destroyed by famine. Then they came out with their hands empty, and though they thus pitied the dead, they had not the same emotions for the living, but killed all they met, whereby they filled the lanes with the dead bodies. The whole city ran with the blood, in so much that many things which were burning were extinguished by blood. In the siege of Jerusalem, not fewer than 1,350,000 were put to death. These were not indeed all slain with the sword. Many were crucified. Many hundreds were first whipped, then tormented with various kinds of torture, and finally crucified. The Roman soldiers, nailing them, out of the wrath and hatred they bore to the Jews, one after one way and another after another, to crosses by way of jest, until at length the multitude became so great that room was wanting for crosses and crosses for the bodies. In today's gospel, Jesus further spoke about the destruction of Jerusalem. The destruction of Jerusalem is the bloodiest and most cruel destruction of human life in the annals of human history. Josephus wrote, "All the calamities which had befallen any nation from the beginning of the world were but small in comparison with those of the Jews. The prediction of Jesus terribly came true. Let us note. 1. The siege of Jerusalem. When the Jews rebelled against the Romans in 66 AD, the Romans sent an army under the leadership of Titus, who later became the Roman emperor. Titus built a wall around Jerusalem to stop many provisions from getting into the city, and thus starve the inhabitants by famine. The Jews, however, drew out their army near the walls and engaged in battle, and the Romans pursued them, provoked by their attempts, and broke into the city. Titus stormed into the city. After taking the city, he gave orders to demolish and destroy the whole city and the temple, except 3 towers which he reserved standing. The city was so completely destroyed, which he reserved standing. The city was so completely destroyed that there was nothing to make those believe who came there that it had been inhabited. So thorough was the destruction of the city of Jerusalem in 70 AD, 40 years after Jesus' prediction. 2. The destruction of the temple. The temple of Jerusalem was the most splendid and magnificent structure in Jerusalem. Herod the Great rebuilt the temple, and it was called as the Second Temple. Even the enemies of Herod said, "Those who have not seen the temple of Jerusalem do not know what beauty is." But this magnificent temple was totally destroyed because it did not recognize the time of the visitation of its Lord. Titus, the Roman general, initially wanted to preserve the temple and frequently sent Josephus, the Jewish priest who was under the custody of the Romans during the siege, to induce the Jews to surrender and thus save their city and their temple. The Jews themselves first set fire to the porticos of the temple. One of the Roman soldiers, without any comment, threw a burning firebrand into the golden window, and soon the temple was in flames. Titus gave orders to extinguish the fire, but amidst tumult, none of his orders were obeyed. The soldiers pressed to the temple, and neither fear nor entreaties nor stripes could restrain them. Their hatred of Jews urged them on their work of destruction, and thus the temple was burnt against the will of Caesar. Terentius Rufus, an officer in the army of Titus, tore up the foundation of the temple with a plowshare, thus fulfilling the prophecy of Micah. Zion shall be plowed as a field, chapter 3, verse 12. Jesus' prophecy was fulfilled to the letter. The predictions of Jesus regarding the destruction of the city of Jerusalem and the temple came true in 70 AD. 97,000 Jews were taken as prisoners. 11 lakhs perished by slow starvation and the sword. It is to be noted that not one Christian is reported by the historians to have perished in this great calamity. Heeding the warning of Jesus, they all fled to a small town called Pella in the districts of Decapolis in 66 AD. May God bless you all. Amen.